Scaling a business isn't all glossy headlines and overnight success. It's messy, it's tough, and it's full of lessons that no one warned you about. I'm Nikki Jupp, founder of Talent Gateway, and I've helped over 100 scale-ups build the right teams, enabling them to grow with confidence. This is Scaling Stories Unfiltered, where founders, CEOs, and scale-up leaders share what really happens behind the scenes. No fluff, no filler, just honest conversations to help you scale smarter. So let's get into it.
And we went from 20 people to 60 very quickly. Started hiring faster than we could keep up to pace with. Started hiring roles that in hindsight probably weren't needed. A bit of an ego thing about how quickly can we get to a big number of people. So scaled too quickly, too dependent on one client. And I think we hired erratically and far too quickly. And of course, when you do that and things do start to go wrong, then you have the real pain of having to fire people.
Today I'm joined by someone who knows what it takes to turn big, bold ideas into real-world success. Spencer is the founder and managing partner of Jointly, an innovation, product and marketing consultancy that helps businesses tackle complex strategic challenges 10 times faster. Whether it's launching new products, solving leadership roadblocks, or driving transformation at scale, Spencer and his team specialise in collaboration and problem solving that actually moves the needle. He's worked with some of the world's largest brands, think Heineken, global banks, and household name foods and drinks companies, helping them to innovate, pivot, and launch market-leading products at lightning speed. One standout example, he led an innovation sprint with Heineken UK that took Foster's Shandy from concept to in-store on the shelves in just 9 months, which is half the usual time. Beyond Jointly, Spencer has founded multiple ventures, led teams across product innovation, strategy, and learning design, and even worked with elite design sprint firms like AJ Smart. His career is packed with lessons on how businesses can break through roadblocks and accelerate growth. Today, we're going behind the scenes with Spencer to unpack what makes and breaks a business, lessons he's learned along the way, and what we should try to avoid if we don't want the business to fail. Spencer, welcome to Scaling Stories Unfiltered.
Nikki, thank you so much. Can I say, what an introduction. I am definitely going to be stealing some of that because I think you've captured it so well.
Wonderful. Let's get cracking, Spencer. Let's share your journey and your sort of start in entrepreneurship. Bring it to life for me.
Yeah, thank you. It's really nice to be able to talk about this because often we don't go back. So this, as far as I'm going to go back now.
Yeah. And
I want to go all the way back to my early childhood, really. And that's this story about my dad. My dad was an entrepreneur. He started a business actually in recruitment. He had a business in the Midlands that was helping people, thousands and thousands of people get temporary jobs often and then into perm roles. And he struggled his way through with that recruitment agency for 25 to 30 years. But he loved it. He absolutely adored everything that he was doing. He loved being the founder, being the CEO of that company and kind of driving change and seeing the impact that it can have on people. And I was so close to it. I was always in his office. I was always around getting that kind of vibe of what it is to be a hustler and to be an entrepreneur in those kind of early days. So I think it was just a part of an existence for me. It was a part of a way to operate, a part of something that I was drawn to from a very early stage. Now, my dad, as I said, he struggled with it. He struggled with business. He struggled with a lot of things. He struggled with making maybe the best decisions and whatever else. And he tried so many different other ventures as well. I remember, for example, he was in recruitment, but he started a design agency. This is way back in the 90s, I think, probably early stages of Photoshop and whatever else. He wasn't a designer, but he saw an opportunity here. He connected with some people that were doing some really interesting things around design. Started this design agency, which was in the loft of his office. It was like this room that was never used, but it was just like, again, seeing that entrepreneurial spirit and trying to capitalize on an opportunity, which really drew me in. And it took me a long time, actually. from that to take that leap myself.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was definitely the inception of what it meant to be an entrepreneur and starting your own thing.
That's so interesting. And that seed sounds like it was planted. And how interesting for him to go from recruitment to a creative agency. So what happened in the early years? Where did you start?
Actually, again, I was nothing to do with entrepreneurship to start with. I was a teacher. I fell into teaching in secondary schools and colleges. I don't want to put teaching down, but it was a bit of a matter of those that can't teach. And what I mean by that is that I had been through university. I came out of university really not knowing what to do.
Yeah.
I did an amazing course, which maybe we'll come back to this kind of two sides of the brain thing, because I was, as a very early in my childhood, I was breaking things, putting things apart, putting them back together. I was building Lego. And my nan actually said to me, "Oh, you're going to be the engineer of the family." So I was like, okay, I don't even know what engineering is, but sure, like that kind of if it means I can break things and put them back together, then great. But then I found out what engineering was, figured it wasn't for me, some of the kind of more traditional roles around engineering. But I found this course, which was called Music Systems Engineering. And really, it was about computer engineering. It was about software and kind of electronics, but with this creative edge, which meant that and I was into music. I was making a lot of music. I was in bands. Still got a guitar behind me, so I still do that as well and keep that creative side of things going.
Yeah.
But I came out of the university not really knowing what to do. I loved technology. I loved being creative, but I didn't lend itself easily to a direct job. And so I fell into teaching, and I taught for about 8 years and slowly moved from teaching IT and spreadsheets and all those kind of things, which is quite tough when people really don't get why you're doing it. And I started to move into much more creative use of technology. I was doing things like games design, web development. Back in the day, it was called kind of new media, using things like projection mapping and all these really creative ways of using technology. And the response from the kids was absolutely incredible. They just absolutely loved it. Getting involved in doing something creative and fun was amazing. So that was it took me a long time, 8 years as a teacher. And then this kind of entrepreneurial spirit kind of came through.
Yeah.
And I started to see opportunities outside of teaching. I did a master's in creative and media education. And actually, ironically, that led me out of teaching because I was so focused on how people learn rather than how to teach. And so I moved into a role which was with the Prince's Trust. Quick story, if I can, which is I think it's always an interesting one. I was teaching, it's horrible year 10 class. This is how I remember it. Horrible year 10, 1 week. And then at Easter, I'd left teaching altogether and joined the Prince's Trust. And the very next week, I was chaperoning Will.I.Am around St. James's Palace to meet Prince Charles and a load of the young people that we were supporting. And I actually met Will.I.Am 7 or 8 times, something like that. I met Prince Charles King Charles now, of course, quite a few times as well. And I was there to spearhead this STEM education, if you like, for people that weren't in education and training and work. And again, that kind of proximity effect of being around very entrepreneurial thinkers, people like Will.I.Am, who in person is exactly as he is on telly. He's all over the place with these ideas. I'd be talking to him, walking down the road, and he'd be coming up with 1 million ideas a second. Absolutely incredible. And it was infectious. And it just captured me. I was only there for a year because I basically got into the kind of London startup scene in the kind of, how long ago was this? It was probably 12 years ago, something like that. So in the kind of, where are we? Yeah, 2015, 14, 15, that kind of year. This really rapid growth of the London startup scene, Silicon Roundabout, and everything that was going on with that. And just being around those kinds of people, again, it was just infectious. It gave me energy. It gave me this completely different outlook on who I was and where I could go. And so I joined a startup as a product director, did some amazing things with some really big organizations. It was a consultancy that had a technology arm. And then from then, really, it was always, my plan was to get closer and closer to being a founder of my own. At that point in time, all I wanted to do was have that title of founder, have my own thing, start my own thing. build my own dream as opposed to somebody else's.
Yes.
And that was both good. And actually, in reflection, there were some negatives around that kind of mindset, I think, which maybe we'll uncover as we carry on talking.
Yeah. Great. What an interesting start. So where from there, you've obviously got this inspiration, you've then this baptism of fire going into that sort of startup phase. What happened in that startup? Did you then just move on? Did you get to start your own thing? Where did the journey take you from there?
Yeah, so I was there for about 3 years and the company evolved. We had changes of leadership. At the beginning, it was the most incredible, stellar C-suite team, if you like.
Yeah.
And I was involved in that kind of leadership team. We had a founder that had exited a couple of times, so super inspirational about making some decent money, having those exits. We had then at that point, a CEO who was Richard Branson's right hand. He was in the cockpit of Virgin Atlantic and whatever else, speaking to Richard Branson on flights and all these crazy things.
Yes.
Incredible marketing people, amazing operational people. And it was just such an energy fueled and
Yes.
amazing learning experience. Startup changed. And actually we hit this point of growth whereby we were super successful with companies, again, financial services, often Barclays. We were actually the catalyst for the Barclays Digital Eagles, if you remember
Yes.
that.
Yeah.
A lot of people in finance will see that as amazing marketing thing. We were training a lot of people and started that kind of Digital Eagles thing. We had some really good successes with other banks. And we then got to the point where we were so reliant on one or two clients that we scaled very quickly.
Yeah.
Maybe we overscaled very quickly because then the wheels started to come off. We didn't have the good foundations. We weren't necessarily going for the right kind of target clients. We weren't building the right products that would really fit for the audience. And I think we got a bit ahead of ourselves. A lot of things changed. Tried to switch into more of a tech company rather than a consultancy. And I could see kind of a bit of a downward spiral with the organization. So that's the point where I was really keen to start my own thing.
Okay.
I actually got in the kind of transition to starting my own company, I was freelancing for them for a few months, which meant I could get that regular income, gave me that little bit of a cushion to be able to start my own thing. And I was trying to take at that point all of the lessons that I'd learned over those few years to help other companies start something new.
Yeah.
So it was and it was called Making Ideas Work. The whole thing about that is you've got an idea, but how do you make it work? Let's make sure that it's the right idea, that we're going for the right audience, and that we're turning it into ideally a successful business. Again, lots of stuttering journeys through that process. And I took some more full-time jobs in the middle of it, but essentially I've been doing that ever since, really.
Yeah. So you said that there was an inspirational CEO there, really strong C-suite team. If you could pinpoint 2 or 3 things, you touched on one, which was the fact that they became dependent on a couple of key clients. But what other things can you pinpoint that would help people who are listening not get themselves in that same situation? You know, why do you think it failed?
Yeah, I think there was an influx of money. So there was a bit of funding and we got some really good traction with, as I say, one major client. It was probably 70% of our business through one client. So that's never good. That kind of bus factor of one. If that client disappears, then the wheels can come off. And that's really what happened. We scaled. This influx of money came in. We went from 20 people to 60 very quickly. Started hiring faster than we could keep up to pace with. Started hiring roles that in hindsight probably weren't needed. It was more of it felt like a bit of an ego thing about like how quickly can we get to a big number of people, because at the time that was thing that people looked at.
Yes, interesting.
Looking for that story.
Yeah.
So it scaled too quickly, too dependent on one client, and I think we hired erratically and far too quickly. And of course, when you do that and things do start to go wrong, then you have the real pain of having to fire people, which we went through a few rounds of basically big layoffs, because the next client of that scale didn't come as quickly as we wanted to. And so that was, as you'll know, like one of the hardest things you have to do is is make those changes and do those layoffs, particularly when there are great people, but there's just not the money that can support that kind of scale. So that was one of the huge lessons, really tough.
Yeah, it's so interesting, that piece about getting the money. And it's a fine balance between spending that money because off the back of the investment, there's been a plan that's been agreed. But often people do tend to hire too quickly or too slowly. People tend to either hire too quickly or hire too slowly and feel the pain either way. But again, coming back to that interesting point about having too much dependency also on one client, and particularly if that's a well-recognised brand, sometimes these, come into it.
And of course, what happens when you have that one client is you start building with only them in mind.
Yeah.
And so we were getting so distracted by servicing this one client and not thinking about the opportunities of how to grow elsewhere and sticking to what was working rather than, and building on the strengths that we had rather than what we tended to do was, everything got dropped for this one client, or we took a wrong approach of not building on those strengths and trying to do something completely different and trying to create this kind of tech startup, which was ultimately what the founder really wanted.
Yeah.
He wanted a high growth tech startup, but it started as a more of a consultancy play, which I think can work. And there's some great successes of people that have done that incredibly well. But the growth, the early and rapid growth trajectory, I think was really the kind of demise of that company. And that was Freeformers. And Freeformers closed a year or two after I left.
Yeah.
It just shut up shop because it was no longer as relevant to people as it was then. And they hadn't done the incremental changes, I think, that were probably necessary.
Yeah. Yeah. Sometimes it's learning by those mistakes. I'm sure everyone went on to do bigger and better things. So tell me, so let's talk a little bit about what's next, what came next in that journey.
Yeah. So at that point, I was really starting my own business, and really it was a freelancing and contracting business, really. It wasn't a high growth startup or anything like that. But what I did was I did a project with Makers Academy, who are they were the first European coding boot camp. And this is back when nobody really believed that you could teach someone to code in 12 weeks. And they had this amazing 12-week course, getting new developers, junior developers to be able to learn to code in 12 weeks. Amazingly successful. And it had a huge number of copycat companies that came about after them. I came in on a project which was to look at a new business opportunity, brand new kind of angle for them, which was around apprenticeships. Because of my education background, because of my kind of venture building interest, I came in and just did that as a short-term project for around about a month. I ended up joining them as the MD of Makers Apprenticeships, as it was then, as just me running that business to start with. So this was a spin out, spin in, eventually change, brand new product, all the regulation, of course, that comes with a regulated apprenticeship course. So we were Ofsted, and we had the challenges of Department for Education and all those kind of things that we had to get through. But what was really interesting and different about Makers, just to jump through, is they grew very slowly. They grew when they needed to, and they didn't underhire, but they didn't overhire either. So when I came on board, things were slow. In fact, a little bit frustratingly slow, to be honest. I wanted to go, the opportunity's here. We've got to capitalize on it and move towards what people are wanting. And it was just me to start with. But we proved out the value of what we needed. And actually, the reason that they took this decision to have this change was it was almost like a pull from their existing clients. So it wasn't just a CEO kind of coming in and going, I want to do this new thing. Here's the shiny new object. This was being pulled. The idea was being pulled from the existing clients. People were asking for it. People were desperate for it. They wanted a new way to hire. They wanted a new way to educate people in a way that worked for their organization rather than the long approach of the school and the university routes and whatever else. They wanted to hire people that were going to fit in culturally as well as technically and skills based. So we were a really good option for them. We worked with, and so my main role there wasn't anything about product, even though I'm a product person. my main role was client development, really. It was looking at the people that had hired through makers before
Yeah.
and looking at the opportunities for them to use their apprenticeship levy and have this alternative approach to hiring junior software engineers.
Yeah.
And before we'd really done anything else, I managed to secure about 5 or 6 different clients to take apprenticeships from us. Even before we'd hired or taken on any apprenticeships,
Yeah.
before we'd put it out there as an actual offer, this all kind of grew very organically because we had a good track record with a lot of clients, and they were just demanding it. They were needing it. If you don't do this, we're going to have to go somewhere else to go and do it. So the need was really obvious, and so it was great. And yeah, from getting those early wins, if you like, of clients that were committing, having what's the word I'm looking for here, intention to buy kind of thing, definitely shown their intention to buy. That's when we started to turn into, okay, this has to operate as a separate business. We have to get a new team. We have to get new premises. And the whole thing then was about, okay, rapidly at that point, we were going quite quickly. How do we pull a team together? How do we make the changes that we need to around the product? How do we make sure that we're fully in line with regulation? And so my role then as kind of founder, managing director kind of thing, and establishing our uniqueness with our clients as well. So yeah, super amazing learning curve. And yeah, I'm happy to talk about that kind of hiring as well, if that's...
Yeah, that'd be really helpful. Be really interesting, actually.
Yeah. So in those early days, as I said, it was me, and I was the face of. So I was very external facing. I was talking at conferences. I was talking to a lot of clients. I was very rarely actually in the office doing the work. And so the first hire that I felt we needed was very much a generalist. And I think this is an important point that I'd love to make around early days of scaling, or of kind of the transition from startup to scale up, if you like, is generalists are amazing people. And what I mean by that is people that can turn their hand to anything. They've got a challenge, they can figure out a solution, they can hack their way to finding out how to get something working, how to break that barrier, break through that barrier, really. And so I hired an amazing guy who I'm still very much in contact with all the time now. He's the kind of he's my go-to when I'm thinking about, like, how can I weave together these systems, and he runs well. And he absolutely brilliant. He was almost my operational right hand, if you like. And that ability to have someone that you're super secure with, trust implicitly, to be able to take something that you say and get it done and deliver it in a rapid time. It might be messy. Yeah, that's fine. At this point, it can be messy. We're not building for scale. We're building for now to get us through some of these challenges. That was of huge importance. And I don't think I could have done what we did with Makers had I not had someone like that can, again, take all of those ideas and those challenges that we had and just, and then he's recognizing the challenges before I'm recognizing them. So straight away I'll be like, oh, we've got, what's going on with this? Don't worry, I've got it already sorted. We've got this pipeline thing. We've got this going on. I've got all these connected wires to these things and whatever else. It's it was absolutely amazing. And then from then it was a matter of getting more specialist people to do very specific roles. So we hired someone around compliance and the regulation side, so they could really understand these reams of documentation that we had to have around compliance. We hired our coaches to deliver the software training. And this is a really interesting point, I think, as well. I think this translates quite interestingly to other companies, but it was, at the time, it felt very unique to Makers. And because we were training software engineers, we were keeping in touch with them as they progressed through their careers as well. So as they moved from junior to mid to senior, or maybe they moved into more of a coaching role within their organization. Yeah. And they came back to us as coaches because we had built a brand and a culture that the students or the junior engineers absolutely loved. So they kept in touch, they kept coming to our events, and it was just natural to hire those people because we had trained them in the way that we wanted them to be trained. So it was almost like this perfect,
like an ecosystem. Yeah. Great learning lesson there.
Yeah. And I think and I was just thinking about this, about whether or not that is transferable to other organizations. And I think it is, even if you're not training them and whatever else, but building a brand and a culture that people love, that kind of 100 true fans type thing, that works as much for your customers as it does for your future hires as well.
Oh,
And I
spot
think,
on. Yeah. If you can do that and do that well, and recognize that also that there is a time to let people go. In the businesses, I don't want to talk too much if this is interviewing you, but the businesses that do it incredibly well recognize as a smaller organization that you can't always, the individual will get to a point where they need to go, they want to go, and there is nothing more that you can do for them at that stage in their career.
Yeah.
And if you say farewell in the most positive, graceful way that you possibly can, that person will want to come back in due course, because you've created such a wonderful environment, which sounds like exactly what you've done there in Makers.
Yeah, it was. And actually, again, another story about this point exactly is that I saw on LinkedIn just last week, actually, end of last week, someone who I haven't spoken to who worked at Makers at the same time as me. So this is going back a good few years. This is probably 2018, 19, something like that. I saw a post on LinkedIn, which was a video of her last day at Makers. It was just a little 20-second or something like that video. And I remember it. And there was, every member of staff was in a line, putting their hands together. And she walked through. Everyone's cheering. There was a song written about her.
Amazing.
And just amazing that she's shared that after all this time, that it's still it's deeply in her heart, this organization. And I think, again, a tangential point, but we often think about onboarding. And from a product perspective, I think about the onboarding process a huge amount.
Yeah.
And from a recruitment perspective, we think about the onboarding and making sure those first few days, weeks, months are as great as they can be. But we rarely think about the offboarding.
Yeah.
We rarely kind of design that or think about what's the best way that we can enable someone to leave and to grow and to go on to better things. And I think that for me was just that wasn't designed. It wasn't a designed moment, but it was just an example of the culture that was created and how amazingly highly we valued everybody, and everybody got that sense. It was so strong.
And in terms of the advocacy, to your point about the video that individual has posted these years later, that business and the people that they worked with has stayed with that individual. And I have no doubt that they would rave about that business in terms of, and whilst you can't put a pound, shillings and pence value on it, it clearly is enormous. And when people talk about recruitment and things like that being expensive, if you've got people like that advocating for you, you don't need to be spending money on recruitment. The work is happening for itself. And
Absolutely.
So what a great story. And it sadly, in all the motivation to have a business that is successful, often the people piece is missed.
It is, yeah. It's a real shame. And I think, again, Makers was an example of the opposite of what had at Freeformers, really. It was so people first. It wanted people to thoroughly enjoy. And we all talk about enjoying work, and you don't work a day in your life if you enjoy what you do and all those things. That's all fine. But it was so people-centric. And by doing that, you get the very best out of people as well.
Yeah.
And everyone's comfortable, and you can have some amazing times, but you can work really hard, but it can be fun. It doesn't have to be fun. It's just fun because you're making great progress. It's fun because everyone's in that struggle. Everyone's fighting for everything that they can. And I think it's an amazing culture.
I want to dig into this a little bit, actually. Where do you think that came from? Because obviously this is creating a culture. What are your thoughts on, was it top down? Was it that they hired a certain kind of person? How did that magic happen?
It's a great question. I think it started with the founder. I think it started with a guy called F. Shadchnev, we've spoken about before.
Yeah.
An amazing founder. He started Makers as a kind of a spin-off from a venture firm that's completely escaped me the name of. I'll come back to perhaps.
Yeah.
And he is an incredibly thoughtful and caring CEO and person and friend. He's considerate. He's very mindful.
Yeah.
He's very in touch with himself. He meditates extensively. He has that yogic kind of quality of understanding, of empathy, of care. If I used to find it a little bit strange at times when we were having a conversation. In fact, I remember my interview and we were having lunch together, and he would pause before answering any question because he wanted to make sure that he's really thinking about the quality of the question and making sure he's providing the right kind of answer. The answer not just that you want to hear, but the answer that he thinks is going to get you into a better place.
Yeah.
And I think that consideration that was far bigger than the financial side. It was about nurturing amazing people. It was almost like a learning environment, an experiment almost, how to work differently, how to manage an organization differently. It was fairly flat in its hierarchy as well.
Yeah.
So there were leaders, and we did have leadership team and whatever else, but everyone felt like they had huge value, and so they could bring them. Used to talk about this, bringing your whole self to work. We talk about it a lot, but I've never seen it ever like I saw it there. It was probably the most inclusive working environment that I've ever been a part of, but not because they were striving for diversity targets, not because they were hiring in a certain way. It's because they had this heart and this kind of inner core of the culture that I think had been started from the founder and the early founding team. So I think it did started to bubble up from below, if you like. Yeah. Because everyone was empowered. Everyone was doing meaningful work. They had this perception of value and worth. We were doing purposeful stuff, and that kind of kept on coming through. It was really important in the message that we were creating, internally and externally. And it was a difference for me of a lived value versus a designed value that you put on the wall, and you have culture or courage and these words. It was difficult to articulate what the culture was, but if you walked into it, you felt it, you knew it. It was there. It was palpable.
It's like the essence.
Exactly, the essence.
Of what sounds like the essence of the leader. And I think the more that can come through with clarity, I always call that kind of thing sort of conscious leadership, the more you can, anyway, I won't go off on one.
Exactly that. No, that you're bang on. I think you're right with those words. I've not heard that expression, I don't think, but that sums up Yevgeny so much. Conscious leadership, exactly what he epitomated. Epitomated is what's the word I was looking for?
Epitomized.
Epitomized.
So that sounds like one hell of an experience. And it sounds like you did an amazing job at building that side of the business, bringing that, as you said, that the teaching element, that world that you'd spent the 8 years in, and then bringing it into this entrepreneurial environment, and did some amazing work with what sounds like an amazing team.
Yeah, and it truly was. We went from a year, really from me starting full time and it being a serious venture, if you like. We went from 0 to around $1 million in revenue in a year and grew the team to 15 and had new premises, new offices, and we were doing monthly cohorts of new apprenticeships starting. We were having an amazing pipeline of new clients as well as existing clients, repeating as well. And so, pretty decent growth. $1 million from zero to $1 million in a year. And a lot of that was based on the foundations that had been set so well within the main organization. And so after about 18 months of getting it to that point, the decision was made. Actually, it was not necessarily outperforming the rest of the business, but it was certainly big enough to spin back into the main organization and have that as the main kind of product
Yeah.
for makers themselves. And that's when I got another opportunity.
Yeah.
And when it was just the right timing I'd done this thing, and in reflection, I think you only realize some of these things when you look back over time. But I'm someone who loves to get things going and working.
Yeah.
And then I'm not really interested in the long-term implementation, long-term execution side. Get it going, get it to a great place, hand it back in a really great position, back to somebody else that can lead it in a different way. Because I'm a scrappy
that early
startup
stage
type person, right? Yeah, early stage. And I think there's a point I want to make here, if that's okay, which is that in previous jobs, I'd got into some challenges with people above me, with my managers, whereby I was a manager or leader, but I was being told that I was not a good manager. I wasn't doing the things that they wanted me to be doing. And so it's like trying to build on those weaknesses. And what I mean by this specifically around management is they wanted me to be, I think, more of a micromanager. That wasn't the expression they were using, but they wanted me to be more hands-on, dictating work and really focusing on that side of things. Whereas my natural way is more, in terms of leadership, is more as a coach or a servant leader, where I see my role as unlocking the barriers that are blocking people, about getting people to do their best work. And I can get out of the way. I'm very happy to get out of the way from people doing their best work. Whereas I was trying to build on the weaknesses and that being seen as a weakness. Whereas when I was at Makers, that was seen as a strength. And I think there's an important thing here about, and I try to do this with my kids as well, even. I recognize your strengths, look back, reflect. And I think this is where I recognize that strength of the 0 to 1, 0 to 10 kind of role for me as a founder, as CEO, whatever, is where I'm far better and not getting drawn into being something that I'm not. I think that's a really important thing.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting. I think I see it where there is less self-awareness and an appetite from people to want to be involved in that very early startup, scrappy phase. But actually, it isn't their natural proclivity. And try as they may, that environment doesn't suit them. And I think the more self-aware we can be about how we play to those strengths and lean into those, the happier we are. It sounds like you're very good at self-reflecting and knowing when you thrive and you're at your best in that continuous learning environment as well.
Yeah. I don't think that came naturally. I think this is something that I've worked on a lot. And I think, and again, some time ago, I went through a process of redesigning my life.
Yeah.
Which sounds pretty huge, and it was, genuinely was. But I was using a lot of the principles that I had as a product person and as a leader to try to understand what was giving me energy, what was sapping my energy, what am I good at, what am I not so good at, but I do need to improve, what am I not good at, but I can leave that because other people can fill in those gaps for me. And I think that reflection has come from it really started with that process that I went through, meditation and mindful practice.
Okay.
And yoga and these kind of things that are really part of my existence now. It's something I do practice ongoing, but it is a practice. And I think this is the point. If you're not good at that reflection, I find it so vital, so important in business, and even more so when you're in a highly intense environment. And when you're trying to move mountains, it's really important to know who you are and where you play best.
Oh, so interesting.
And so, I went through that process to unlock and to understand, I guess, who I was and how I can serve people in the best way.
We're definitely going to come back to that. So I'm just going to write a note to oneself there. So where next after Makers?
So at Makers, I joined a former employee of Makers as well to start a brand new startup. And it was incubated inside Founders Factory. So great accelerator and incubation VC.
Yeah.
And I joined as chief product officer, very early stage. I think we'd had about 200 grand of funding when I joined. So this is funding before I had joined, 250, I think it was funding before I joined. So I wasn't involved in the fundraising round. And I joined at a point where we had product market fit.
Yeah.
And when I, as a product person, I want to make sure that's the case and what's going on here. I looked and we hadn't got product market fit, I don't think at all.
Yeah.
We had some early wins and a little bit of traction, but very much with one client. And when we looked at the landscape and really critiqued what it was we were looking to build, it wasn't resonating, and it wasn't quite right. There was a landscape already of competitors that were more advanced than we were. We didn't bring anything new to the table. We hadn't found a unique differentiation that was going to unlock growth. And so we went through a process quite early on of trying to figure out, if it's not that, then what is it?
Yeah.
Even though we'd had the funding and we'd unlocked that, it wasn't the business that maybe was portrayed to be.
Right.
So we ended up going through a series of pivots, if you like, and experimentation to find out what this thing should be.
Yeah.
It was called Future Builders. So it was in the kind of learning space. But again, it was very much about technical learning and coding. At that time, I personally didn't feel like that was what was needed. And so we explored different options. And we weren't getting the traction that was needed in those early days. So we went through a whole series of experiments. At one point I think we had 15 different ideas that we create landing pages for. We served up some ads to see who's clicking, who's looking, who's interested in this stuff.
Yeah.
So we had this. And again, from a learning curve perspective, I hadn't really done that much with ads. I could build websites, but not that rapid kind of building that we were doing. 15 different websites in a week, all with ads that was. And we went through a process over around about a month of going from 15 down to 5, down to 3 ideas. And then again, carried on with rapid experimentation to figure out the language and the actual product that people were looking for, and also price points as well to get some early indications, because it's fine testing an idea with someone, with a friend or whatever else, but they're going to give you what you want to hear.
Yeah.
When you're asking for a credit card detail, that's when shit gets real, if you don't mind me saying. But when the rubber hits the road, are people willing to give us their money for these products? And we were building, it was basically, it turned out to be something that was probably too early for what we were building. It was an AI platform to help people to learn at the point of need based on where they are and where they're going. So rather than, in my experience as an educator, I figured out that I'm not really needed, because everything is out there online somewhere. You can find whatever you want. You can go to free courses. You can do all that stuff. So I'm not really needed as a learning kind of designer or whatever. How can I get rid of myself? And so I thought, actually, if we're serving people the thing that they need to learn based on what their challenges are right now and where they're going for their career, then it's learning at the point of need. It's learning within the work world and whatever else. And so we're trying to build this AI platform. Now, back then, unless you've got amazing technical people and a whole load of money, AI was really tough.
Yeah.
And so we built a kind of early product, was a kind of a learning playlist creator. So people could create playlists around a particular topic. Think Spotify, but for learning. Playlists about learning around a specific topic. So if I wanted to know everything about scale-up recruitment, and you know, maybe I'd be able to follow you and what you're reading, watching, listening to, conversations that you might be having, and then I'd be able to follow in some of your journey towards getting a great understanding of scale-up recruitment, for example.
Yeah.
And so this idea of people as almost like graph, people as nodes on this graph, but their knowledge graph is what I want to tap into. I'm getting maybe a bit technical, but like trying to
Sounds
give
very
people
interesting.
And truth be told, there's a little bit of me that is still really interested in that idea. I've very much put it to bed, and I think, as a slight tangent, I think that's a really important thing to do. If you have a business that fails, and I have had this one failed, I've had to put it to bed. I've had to not go down that route again, because actually it's a little, not trauma, but there's challenges that I didn't overcome at that point, and
Yeah.
I want to leave there. But yeah, we got this investment. Everything looked amazing. We were celebrating for getting this product, launching this thing, getting thousands of people signing up within days when we launched
Wow.
it. It looks like everything's going really well, but we had no business model. We had no real way of knowing. We wanted to give it away for free, but we tried charging methods and whatever else. And then we tried to do more of a B2B2C kind of
Yeah.
model. So we sell or give it away for free, but those individual users then see the advantage of doing this within organizations, and then organizations could then buy the ability basically to create their own playlists, their own learning journeys for their staff.
Yeah.
So that was the big strategy. And at this point, I should say that the team was toxic. The other two people in the team had left. I was left with myself and a bit of occasional support from Founders Factory and coaching and products and whatever else, and marketing. But there was huge toxicity within that group. It was a founding team of 3. We were all C-suite, so we had CFO, CPO, CEO, CTO, and not managing anyone beneath us.
Yeah.
So we're clearly overinflating our own titles for what we thought, for how we thought we wanted to come across externally. But there was constantly the friction between me sitting in the middle between the CEO and the CTO. They were constantly in conflict. So I would be moving between my allegiances based on the meritocracy of the idea or the challenge that we're trying to face. And eventually it got so draining that I think everybody just thought this is not the environment that I want to be working in. The CTO left first, and then the CEO left, and then I became CEO by default. And a month later, COVID started. And this was at the point where I'd got a good investment thesis or fundraising thesis. I'd got a good story that I wanted to tell. We had got to thousands of users that were actively using it. We had a business model that we were trying to go with. I had a pilot startup that I was working with within that business model, and very manual. It's all very hands-on in those days. Then COVID kicked in. I'd done one kind of demo day pitch in the February, I think. And then, of course, no one's answering their calls. Everyone's battening down the hatches. No investment happens for months and months. At the same time, we had got a small grant from Nesta. So we got about 50 grand from Nesta. Then it was a difficult battle of, do I carry on? And I tried to carry on for another 6 months.
Yeah.
And basically servicing that Nesta grant and going through the hoops really of what I needed to do for the Nesta work. But yeah, slow and steady demise.
Pain. So what was the biggest lesson you learned?
I think the biggest thing for me, and this is something that rings so true for me now, is you want to work with great people, of course. You want to work with great people who are technically brilliant and able and fit the gaps that you have maybe in that you need to have filled. But I want to be working with people that I love to be around, that I get energy from. And I think it's not, I want to love working with them, but I also want to go for a coffee or a drink or I want to know them as individuals beyond the workplace. And for me, the two biggest things that now I think about with every project that I do and every person that I work with, is this someone that I love being around, that gives me energy? And is it a project that does the same? So I don't want to be working on projects that are not creating value in some way. And I don't want to be working with people that are taking or sapping value or energy away from me. And I think that was the biggest lesson, really. Toxic founding team. I just don't see how that can ever work.
Yeah. And it sounds to me that Makers Academy culturally was a place that for you made your heart sing would be the way I would describe it. And I'm sure you felt alive when you were working in that environment.
Hugely. Yeah, exactly. And I think that culture shock of going into the next place directly the next week was vast and overwhelming, and it took its toll. I went through some real challenges during those 2 years, having a failed business, but also, does that mean that I'm a failure? These are the kind of things that kind of go through your mind. And it took a long time to come out of that, I think. And luckily, I've got amazing family and friends that rallied around and supported me in every way possible. And so, it was eventually dusting myself down, and what comes next? On to the next one.
So it's sort of personal growth now. What do you have any particular support systems or a mentor or a peer group that actually you lean into when you're in different environments?
It's one of the things that I've struggled with in the last, I think, since Future Builders failed. And I eventually started jointly the business that I run now, with a co-founder, with someone who lives in Edinburgh. I'm in London, he's in Edinburgh, but we talk daily. He's actually in France at the moment. We were talking last night, not because we felt we needed to, but just because we wanted the connection. And so I get a lot of support from him, and I think that gives me energy. We support each other, we bring each other up when one of us is down, all that kind of stuff. And there's also, I'd say, I'll come back to another point. I've just thought of another thing that I would definitely want to say, but I've got probably 3 or 4 people that I'm regularly in contact with who are going through similar kinds of things. Maybe they are running a small business or a small startup, or they're a solopreneur, if you like. And I find it quite challenging myself to be proactive. I tend to immerse myself with the people that are directly around me at that time. So it takes me a moment to give them a call or whatever else, but they are amazing that they'll call me often, and we do get there, but I find that invaluable. I think of them as associates of the business and associates of me. They are not just coaches, not just mentors, not just friends. There's something different. Someone that will, again, give me an energy surge when I need it, or tell me that I'm wrong about something, or that I should have done something differently, and give me that harsh feedback that I need. So I think that's of huge importance. But I do want to say that I'm in my office at the end of my garden, which I built during lockdown, and I'm here every single day, pretty much. I'm off, sometimes at clients or whatever else, but I'm here for 90% of the time. And it can be really isolating. It can be really lonely. It can be really challenging at times. And so I am trying to connect in bigger ways with wider networks, having dinners, having networking meetings, going to places where I think through COVID and subsequently from that, places that I've been reluctant to engage in because of getting so used and stuck into a kind of a routine. It felt like such a big effort to go into London. That's all it is. But to go into London and meet people and go for a coffee and whatever else, I really had to pull myself out of that trap of the isolation. But this year is very much about connecting with more people. It's about, finding, not for business growth or financial benefit, but for connection and communication and shared experiences. My family are wonderful, but they don't know what this is really. They don't know what this world of entrepreneurialism or startup world is really. And so I find it really hard to have really in-depth conversations about things like that. So I think it's really important to have a strong network around you, really close network, but I'm now trying to broaden that out to be more of a network of people that can, like you and I, we have chats now,
inspire you, make you laugh, have a giggle. I'm drawing it to a close shortly, but I'm not going to let you get away that easy. I've got a couple more questions, and I guess one question I would ask is your view on any myths that you would like to bust about growing a business. We use the word scaling a business, so that rapid growth. So be really good, because we all have these preconceptions of things. But what's one myth that you would bust?
I would question the notion of needing to grow. And what I mean by that is that success isn't about a funding round or growth unnecessarily or an exit. For a lot of people, that doesn't determine success. Success is something which is determined by your views and what you want success. You can label success in whatever way you want. You can determine what success is for you and your organization. And I think that growth for the sake of growth is maybe not the right approach.
Yeah.
Grow when it's right to grow, when that's really is in your DNA as an individual, but as a business as well.
Yeah.
Blitz scale when you need to, and when the urge and the pull is so strong, but don't do it for the wrong reasons. Don't do it as I've tried because of ego or because of that's what you're supposed to do.
Yes.
That's what they're supposed to do. They're supposed to grow and scale and exit, but actually. And there's a really nice story. I'm sure you've heard this one. I'll get it completely wrong, but to paraphrase this story, the story of the fisherman on an island who has one boat and successfully fishes, and every day he brings his family food, and the family and friends and the local community eat the food of the fish that he successfully catches. And then someone comes along, an entrepreneur, a founder comes along and says, "Hey, you're doing really well. How about if we got you another boat?" And he fishes for 2 hours a day, and spends the rest of the time in his family on the beach and whatever else having fun. The founder comes in and says, "Hey, why don't you get another boat? And then you can get double the amount, and then you can sell it. And then we'll get another 2 boats, and we'll scale until you've got this amazing life. And then you'll be able to sell the business." And then he says, "Then what can I do?" And he says, "Then you'll be able to live, you could be able to spend more time with your family and play and be on the beach." And it's what I do now. And I think that's a good story, because looking around at what you have, and yes, scale if that's what has to happen and that's what you're driven by, and you've gone through certain situations that mean maybe that you have to scale and whatever else. But have a look around. Is that the right thing for you? I would bust that myth.
Love it. Oh, thank you so much.
It's a pleasure.
Thoroughly enjoyed that.
So that's it for this episode of Scaling Stories Unfiltered. And if you enjoyed the conversation, don't hesitate to hit the subscribe button and share it with someone who's on their own scaling journey. And I'd love to hear from you, whether you've got a question or a personal story to share, or even want to suggest someone that I should interview. Just head on over to the link in the description below. Your insights could be featured in one of the next episodes. In the meantime, why not check out some of our other interviews for some unfiltered stories about scaling a business. Thanks so much for listening, and I'll catch you on the next one.